on the class subject, I had a question on the, what is that game you were talking about? Hamel Brea?
Oh, Hama Brea,
With
yeah.
with the kobolds?
Yeah, the kobolds were clearly like marginalized by the system and the text.
I wanted to specifically ask you a question, though. Would you say that they're coded as hillbillies at all?
No, they're not. Although that's an interesting point. No, they're coded very much as geez, it's almost like they are the stereotypical mid 20th century Eastern European immigrant. They don't, they dress up as if they knew something. They try to fit in. They posture. They throw a lot of money around, but they have no class and they're stupid. And they are occasionally lucky, the little bastards. So that's annoying.
What year was
Hama Brea is 1992, 3, or 4.
Okay.
Right. 1, 2, 3, 90, and again, it's interesting in that all the other, I talked about this, that they are so distinctively not like that for all the others.
Right.
And so it's, and also remember, they're all human looking. So the picture of the kobold is a sort of a tiny, cute-ish, if obnoxious human, not a monster type. The trolls are the only ones who have kind of a monstrous, semi-monstrous appearance, and even they have kind of a country bumpkin look rather than a, truly awful look.
Right.
But yeah, that's an interesting point. They are coded differently from that. They are kind of like city dwellers who are trying to be social badasses, and they're just hopeless at it.
I was going to say that, thinking about just going back briefly to Legendary Lives, and one of the things that I think makes that an effective game in terms of the way that it deals with the different races is that it also has this kind of geopolitics that's going on, right? That it gives you a map, and it also reminds me of Dark Earth, which has something. It's a very different.
Pretty strong in this regard. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they both give you these maps, and accompanying the maps are at least some kind of sketching out of history and geopolitics, so that all of those different kind of character classes have this kind of layering that's kind of going on in them that kind of makes them.
It comes out. It's really a shock to discover that in Legendary Lives. It's a shock to discover that the game has that kind of coherence. Because you take one look at the map and you're like, fuck, okay, elf lands, dwarf land, pirate land, bird people land. All right, this is bogus. You can just switch everything else around on this map and it's the same. And then you read it and look at the options for character creation and look at the religion stuff. And like, oh, wait a minute. No, it really matters that the Elven Empire is right there. It really matters. This actually makes a lot of sense. And then Dark Earth is, again, you look at it and you kind of say, okay, this is the blasted wastelands of Mordor. This is where the dwarves have their old kingdom. Oh, look, this is the place where the free city has blossomed. Okay, I get it. Then you look again and you say, wait a minute, no, this actually is making a lot of sense. And so I agree. I found that lacking in Talislanta. That's a good point. When I look at the map of Talislanta, it's just a blob. And there's frozen mountains in the north, and there's a desert over here. And that's it. There's no the arrangement of stuff is not very not very compelling. It doesn't matter. So Herman, are you looking at the map? Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell. If you look at the map for Dark Earth, you're probably not going to be immediately compelled by it. So I don't want to just judge it on the glance, but I do recall that precisely what you're talking about was absent, which contributed to that smooth blend of what looks like a kaleidoscope, but is actually kind of just a bunch of M&Ms.
Yeah. So it's like having a map with different physical circumstances, like a ground up building of fictional integrity
I
for.
agree. And Glorantha is another interesting example because it kind of has that for a couple of variables, and then it kind of doesn't, and then everybody has struggled to refine the map ever since so that it will have it after all.
Right.
Which is, sort of interesting. So I guess if you look at, role playing in Glorantha as it exists today, the game by that name, you should be on those Facebook groups or on those discussion groups. I mean, people have it down to the hillside, at this point.
Right.
But back then, it was kind of a mess. It was like, okay, this little bit makes sense because this empire wants to go through this pass. And then after that, there's just like blobs. Okay, this is over here and that's over there, I guess. And then it expands a little more, and then you suddenly realize there's a whole ocean right there off the map that you'd never seen before, or had mentioned before in any of the material. And, see what I mean? I mean, it kind of grew, and then the details get filled in to make sense, more or less. So it is that what other features have a lot of diverse character options? Tekkamel is another one, right? Where, again, I believe in the original Tekkamel, and my earliest text is like one step after the original. I don't own the 1975. I own some of the books that are summaries of that material. And in those, you play a person. You play a person who is in the Empire, but you're not truly recognized as a citizen of the Empire, but you've come to this place where you can qualify to be a citizen. So now you have a reason to go adventuring, basically. And as the game expanded, again, a lot like Glorantha, you had more and more options. But you know what? I don't know those texts as well. And there's at least 5 different systems for Tekkamel. Herman, do you know of any where you can play any of those weird races? Because the cool alien races of Tekkamel are great. I mean, you've got all kinds. You got the crocodile people and they got like radial symmetries, right? So they've got like a crocodile with 5 evenly spaced legs and all sorts of weird shit.
I'm trying to remember. Of course, there's Earth Dawn, but that's more fantasy, or more sort of cross between traditional fantasy and some weird things thrown in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a long time since I've read that. Earth Sky Realms of Jarun, which would,
at least in the PDF copy of the rules that I have, you actually only play humans or slightly big, tough humans or small but magical or psychic humans.
That's right.
And then there's these other cool, so that I guess probably maybe there was a supplementer, I don't know. I remember the Dragon Magazine ads for Skyrim of Tarun showed that little guy with the stalk eyes and said, "This is like no role-playing game you've ever seen before. Look at these crazy aliens." And then it's a little disappointing to get there and see, oh, but you're a player character.
Right. Look at these cool aliens that your GM can play for you. Right.
Yeah.
So, it's that's correct in my copy, is that those are the 3 options. But the various alien races are distinctive enough, and it kind of has the conceit of being, it's sort of the Barsoom thing. It's very fantastical, but of course, it's science fiction. And Tekkamel I don't know if you know this, but Tekkamel also has the interesting conceit of having a science fiction justification for everything, but the net effect is so fantastic that you're playing fantasy. You're experiencing it as fantasy.
Right.
And I would be awfully surprised if nobody did first of all, I know people do the informal play of non-humans in Tekkamel because I've seen it. But there's not much guideline for doing it. You don't really quite ever get the troll treatment. I don't think there is a troll pack equivalent for Tekkamel or if there is, it's in one of the later developments of the game that I don't know much about, which is kind of too bad. I mean, there's some of them, especially some of the enemy races, are clearly got their own viewpoints, their own thing happening, whatever it is.
Right.
That you can't help but be interested in them. It's Barker's, skill at making the exotic fascinating. That's his whole thing, and that there's a logic behind there that's just not yours, whatever it is. So
yeah, well, yeah, because I was going to ask in terms of like with Tecumel, what you see as the big draw of playing some of those other races. I mean, because it sounds like part of it is just that physically they look strange.
It's true that they're there to be weird in a lot of cases,
right? But it seems like yeah, that for me, like the more substantive draw then would be that they have a viewpoint, and perhaps that's a little opaque to us right now, but giving you enough of a hook to kind of like say, okay, I want to kind of explore that and try to figure out like what makes this.
I feel that way about several of the different groups. Now, some of them I don't really want to know because they are a little bit. What's the word I want? They benefit from the sinister opacity, and to kind of get beyond that or past that, if they turned out not to be opaque, if you only opened your eyes, that's kind of disappointing, because there's a degree of Robert E. Howard like horror at being in the clutches or interacting. It's like Worms of the Earth, the Robert E. Howard story with Bran McMorn. The serpent people are really freaking degenerate. I mean, they are really terrifying. The whole point of the story is that Bran McMorn makes a deal with them to get revenge on a Roman governor who had executed one of his men. And at the end, Bran McMorn is like, I'm really sorry I did this. That really sucks. I did the wrong thing by messing with you people. And they keep their deal too. It's not like they betray him or anything. They're just horrible. And so it's kind of like that for some of the Tecumel groups. They may have a logic in there, but I don't want to go there. Whereas some of them, on the other hand, are more like the trolls. It's cool that they're monsters and they're really, 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 really interesting. I could play one of those. And yeah, it'd be just what you talk about. I'm not sure anybody else wants to play with me, but we could, and it might be really, really cool. Right? It could be really, really interesting. This could be a really good bit. But I don't, again, I'll have to ask my friend James, who lives and breathes Tecumel, to inform me about, say, what do you mean you haven't read the 1997, pack on this group? And I'll be like, I'm sorry, James, I haven't, So anyway, I don't know if we got really anywhere, but it's true that okay. I don't know if current academia has managed to get past the shocking fact historically, that the thing we've all alluded to, that calling these pseudo species races and having some of them be player character options and some of them not be player character options, and then in a lot of the games having an adversarial, a built-in adversarial, even lethal or genocidal role toward them. Okay, those few sentences right there, that will keep a generation of academics occupied. Right, that's so to step past it, not necessarily to step past it in terms of getting over it, because some of it you can't get over. You look at it and you go, okay, there's a reason why a ton of us immediately jumped to playing the orcs and goblins, even if it wasn't in the rules. There was a reason why, people instantly started playing the monsters, as quickly as they could into the games, or started trying to do different things with it, because it is squicky. Whether that means Tolkien is fundamentally squicky or not, well, the academics are arguing over that too. Whether Burroughs and Howard's treatment of ethnicities is squicky is probably not controversial, but what is controversial is then trying to reconcile it with this awesome, adventure fiction. And looking at some of the places where they even subvert their own selves in some characters sometimes. After all, Bran MacMorn is a Pict, which in Howard's construction is usually treated as the let's slaughter them now, slaughter them fast American Indians, which is the way he treats the Picts in most of the stories, except that when he writes Bran MacMorn, he's the protagonist, and he's battling against Rome. So, even Howard tended to flip around on himself sometimes. To the extent of a few positive black characters and Conan's major girlfriend, who is, in the code of his setting, Jewish. So, there's a lot of interesting stuff in Howard that you kind of come pull on, and weird little threads come off, and you're like, oh, that's in there. But the point is that we know all of this is, well, here's the word, right? Problematic. We know it is.